Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary of Fort Worth 148.
This is Grant Gates, Fort Worth 148 Tyler.
This is Gabriel Jagush, Master Mason with Fort Worth 148.
Well, guys, it's good to be back. I'm looking forward to this episode. We kind of came up with the title, Ever to Walk and Act as Such, and going to be discussing what it means to be a Mason. What do you do to be a Mason? So I think we're going to have some interesting discussions on this one.
Yeah, how do you act and what kind of behavior goes along with that? Do we want to do Masonic news and then jump into questions and then discussion?
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like.
All right.
Hit it.
So, in Masonic news, we still have the travel gavel. Come and get it, please. Our stated meeting is this coming Monday. So
I did hear Hanley is coming.
Really?
So, yep. If you're coming, bring some folks because you got some competition.
That'll be great. Yeah, that's. I think we had Arlington Lodge showed up when we were competing for it, and we just had more people. But yeah, it'll be good. Our stated meeting is this coming Monday. It's the second Monday of every month, and I don't know when our next degree is, but it's also available for degrees. But just come to the stated meeting, have some food, steal our gavel. We'll steal it right back.
And on that note, we're doing a fellowcraft the Monday after stated meeting. So,
do I have a new lecture to learn?
Get on the fellowcraft.
Yeah, but so bring 7 or more brothers to one of our stated or called meetings, and you get to take it home. March 6th was the 242nd anniversary of Prince Hall being made a Mason. A happy birthday to him, so to speak, and positive vibes to all of our Prince Hall affiliated brothers. You may have seen this article on mirror.co.uk. There was a quote-unquote 700-year-old Templar cave found behind a rabbit hole in the British countryside. Take a big grain of salt with this. This was actually posted to Reddit and attracted the attention of several of the users. And a user called Crypto Engineer he said, a quick search shows that these caves, Caton Caves, have been known for at least 5 years, possibly much longer. Their age is unknown, and a Templar connection is completely speculative. A more likely origin is as a folly in the mid-1800s. Now, I meant to look up what a folly was, but I don't actually know. So, do either of you know what a folly is?
No, not in that sense, I don't think.
Well, either way, though, thinking of it as a Templar cave is pretty cool. I'm going to keep thinking it's a Templar cave just because it's fun to pretend. But it's under a farmer's field. It's less than a meter underground, and there's a big network of underground walkways and stuff, and the entrance looks just like a rabbit hole. Like, you can't really tell how on earth a person would have gotten through that hole.
It looks like folly means lack of good sense or foolishness, and I think having to go through a rabbit hole in a cave.
One of our live listeners has posted a definition. A costly ornamental building with no practical purpose, especially in a tower or mock Gothic ruin, built in a large garden or park. That actually kind of makes sense. So it's like somebody built a Templar cave, quote-unquote, with no purpose.
I got to tell you, here's the best definition I've found. A theatrical review, typically with glamorous female performers. So,
man, there must have been some glamorous female Templars. Sign me up, question mark? But yeah, so it's near Shropshire Village in Albrighton. I don't think I said that right. And there are inscriptions all over the walls. It's just kind of cool. You know, when I found out about the article, I posted it to the private Facebook group saying, you know, we Templars now. And, but, you know, that's just, me joking around. Speaking of Templars, the Knights Templar Eye Foundation, which is run by the Grand Encampment, now has a Facebook page. So go check them out at KTI Foundation on Facebook and online at www.knightstemplar.org/KTEF. So, on a more personal note, I wanted to talk about a private, pet research project of mine that I'm calling the Quest for Judas Maccabeus. It was a non-Christian alternative to Commandery that was founded in New York State in the 1970s by a guy called Herman Sarachan. He was a brother. The requirement was similar to Knights Templar, that you be a Royal Archmason. In the beginning of it had brothers involved from the New York State Grand Chapter, Council, and Commandery. And initially, it didn't really seem like it was made it out of the state of New York, but there were some references that said it made it into New Jersey and Connecticut, and that several states like California and Ohio had expressed interest. But there's no evidence that they ever chartered assemblages, right?
Yeah.
I made contact with one of the guys in New York, one of the brothers who was in the order, and one who knew a member of the order, and that was really cool to talk to them. Most of the guys involved in the Order of Judas Maccabeus have passed away or just don't have an online presence because they tend to be older. And I'm trying to learn more about this, so it's been kind of difficult. I eventually acquired a ritual, like the ritual book for the Order of Judas Maccabeus for the state of Texas. And so apparently we had an assemblage here in Texas. I don't know where. And I don't know when they met or anything like that, or if they're still operating. So, but I do know that the revision of the Texas ritual was dated 2007, and it was done by the late brother Cliff Cameron, who was the Grand Historian of the Texas Grand Council. There are 2 degrees, the Order of David and the Order of Judas Maccabeus. There was going to be a third order, but Brother Sarachan died before he could finish it. Brother Arturo de Hoyos is working with the Grand College of Rites to find out if there are any assemblages of the order left. And if it's truly dead, then they're going to put it in the Collectanea for the annual publication of the Grand College of Rites. So that'll cement it as kind of a dead rite. I've got more material on it. You can go to texanmason.com and go to the archive, and it's just titled... I've got more material on it, and you can learn more about it by going to texanmason.com. You go to archive, and it's called The Quest for Judas Maccabeus. But my request, if you guys know something, if any of the listeners have heard of the order, they know where an assemblage is, if they've encountered it at all, please email Fort Worth, info@fortworth148.org, or email me, texanmason@gmail.com, or just reach out to me at my website, texanmason.com, and let me know, because I really want to find an assemblage of the order. That would be super cool.
That would be neat.
So, meanwhile, while my iPad freaks out, I'm going to move over to my phone. So, fortunately, that hit us at a break point, because we can actually just cut that and move to questions.
Yeah, that's a good break.
So,
where did we end up?
So I finished that thing about the order, and now I can say, we're going to talk about questions.
Moving on to questions.
So this was not a question that was directly addressed to us, but it popped up on Reddit, much like a lot of the questions that I'm going to be positing to the group here. The first question that I found that was kind of interesting was, should spouses be in the same lodge? So, if we have a brother who, he has a husband and the husband gets initiated, should they be in the same lodge? Is that like a conflict of interests? What do you guys think?
No.
It would be like saying that 2 spouses going to the same church is a conflict of interest. If 2 gentlemen express their love that way and they want to be involved, and you're not in Tennessee, then more power to them.
Right.
Yeah.
No. Absolutely more power to them, because that seems like they might enjoy it more. Which is something a lodge has to prepare for.
Right. Well, and the way I looked at it is a lot of times your spouse is your best friend, and you wouldn't really think twice about bringing in your best friend into Masonry, right? So logically, if your spouse is male, then you wouldn't have to think twice about it. I was reading through that thread, and there were a couple people that said, like, hey, our main concern is, not that it is a concern, but our main concern is, what if they get divorced or whatever? Like, what is the lodge harmony going to look like? That kind of thing. I'm all for it. Bring your friends, bring your husbands. So, I like it.
No, that's been silly, but absolutely,
that's a family tie to the lodge. It helps keep you there.
And I see that question's, it's kind of silly, but at the same time, it breaches the subject, which is important, because the more we talk about it, the easier it gets, for guys to bring them into the fold.
Yeah.
Because
that question was posited by somebody who was, I guess, reading a petition or working on a petition from a guy that, he would be the first openly gay guy in their lodge. So it was one of those things that's like, wow, like for some lodges, like this is a really big step, So it's not always something that the brothers in that lodge will have encountered, which is kind of odd to think about, but it also kind of makes sense, that this tends to be an institution which attracts, more conservative folks, so. No,
it is. Because in the end, we all get a vote on who joins. But, that question, it just seems crazy, because if they're a good guy, a spouse or not, they deserve to be a Mason. And if they want to go to the same lodge, great.
Guaranteed they'll show up more.
Guaranteed to show up more. That's true.
Yeah, if you're coming together, sure does make getting there a whole lot easier. Not leaving somebody at home.
So, absolutely. That if it actually came to, to transpire, I don't even think that should be an issue that's brought up.
Well, and you can't make a decision on a man's petition looking into the future and asking what ifs. Oh, what if they separate and we have a conflict? Well, what if a brother loses his job or reaches finances? You start getting in what if questions, and no one would ever be qualified. You base the qualifications on the man, and if the man is qualified, move forward.
There you go.
Yeah. Yep. A little bit of that, walking uprightly that we talk about. The second question that I found on Reddit, that I want to pitch towards your guys is, what, I guess, am I allowed to talk about the lectures to non-Masons / and then this is my tack on to it. What am I allowed to talk about in terms of degree work, lectures, that kind of thing, So if we're talking about this with non-Masons and we want to get really detailed, where do we steer clear? Because what do you guys think?
So for me, because there's stuff that's ritual that we memorize, and for the non-Mason, why even get into that? There's so much stuff that we can use out of the monitor that's directly related to the degree that's in print. And there's no, So to wax on about the degrees, save that for your brothers. There's no reason to even, if someone's like, what are you doing there? It's a ritual about moral teachings, to be a better man. Other than that, you could bust out your monitor and take them through the stuff that's legal to talk about. You know what I mean? That you're not going to get yourself in any trouble.
But it's kind of pointless, right? Like, because there's that huge lack of context,
Well, in a sense, but, when they're non-Masons, first of all, if they're thinking about joining, you don't want to spoil anything. But if they want to get deeper into it, you can go over, look, we teach brotherly love. and open up. It's right there written in our book what brotherly love means to us. We teach relief, truth. The cardinal virtues are in there. So if they want to go deep, I mean, you've got a years or more worth of stuff to talk about right out of that monitor. But what we memorize that can't be written, that's where it starts getting real iffy, even getting broad with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, there's some stuff that I, like friends, family, my mom has asked me about, hey, can you tell me about this? And I'd be like, hey, I'm actually not sure if I can talk about that. So I'm going to err on the side of I can't, So
yeah. No, and they'll, because I'll tell people, at the basis of the ritual, we take an obligation to each other, to take care of each other and treat each other right. You can, you're not describing the ritual itself. You're just giving them an overview, especially for somebody like mom, or wife that needs to be comfortable. If it's somebody that has the potential of joining, you want to be careful just not to spoil anything. The more surprise, the better. And that's when you take them around the long route. But when it comes to mom or wife that's really curious or maybe even concerned, you need to be as open with them as you can. Of course, you can't tell them grips and words, how we identify each other. That's like the secret number one.
Yeah. And I think we've actually touched on it, but I don't know if we've touched on this podcast, but in previous discussions, we've touched on the idea that there is very little in Masonry that is actually secret. Whether it be legally considered secret or just, ritually or practically considered secret.
You got it. And, what you've got to do in the end, because there is such a wide variety of what people believe that they can talk about and what they can't talk about. And while what you may be doing is legal, it's going to get you into muddy water it's going to slow your progression, and you just want to steer clear of it. So err on the side of caution, because you're going to have plenty of time to discuss this stuff with brothers,
The other thing, if you're talking to a candidate, there is plenty out there published on Kindle, on Amazon, to give them a better idea of what they're looking at getting into. Last week we touched on the initiatic experience in our question group. Mm-hmm. If you have a potential brother or someone who wants to join and they really want more information and you're not comfortable, you're not sure if you're violating your Grand Lodge law, send them to something that's in print. If they're interested enough, they'll take the time to read it and get an idea of what they're doing. So
yeah, the monitor, obviously, while we shouldn't this is my personal opinion, obviously. I don't believe we should be distributing copies of the monitor willy-nilly, but if we find it useful, then absolutely, we should, selectively, of course,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
Well, no, it's for you to use, because if you've got somebody asking you about what you're doing, they're a coworker or something, tell them, hey, let me go home and do some reading and I'll have a good answer for you tomorrow. And look through that monitor and tell him what stands out to you, temperance, fortitude, whatever it may be, and just expand on it a little bit. And they'll get the idea of what it's about, while the ritual itself still stays a surprise and has that impression that we're looking for.
And folks, unless you really know this person, stick to semi-monitorial stuff. Don't just go, hey, have you ever heard of the Kabbalah? Try and stay away from that. But yeah, it's a very useful tool. I love the freedom that printed material allows us because this varies upon your jurisdiction. But in Texas, if it is printed in the monitor, or if it's in Lightfoot's monitor or whatever, right? But if it's printed, it's not a secret. So you can talk about it.
You got it.
So, I have profane I have profane. Well, now that's just a hard word.
You'll get there. Try again.
I have profane friends. There we go.
I got it.
Who know what the 24-inch gauge and common gavel are for, because that's in print,
Yeah.
And I pointed them towards it. Hey, this is what it is. Check out this link. Here's a discussion on it. It's, I wasn't quite sure what I could talk about, but now that I see that it's in print, let's talk about that. So they wanted to know more about symbology, and so I was able to provide them with something that I could safely provide them with, and to my knowledge, no obligations were violated.
No, because it's in print, and I use the working tools. I have the elevator speech on the working tools. If somebody starts quizzing me down about it a lot, we use things like the 24-inch gauge that's 24 inches, 24 hours in a day, that, teaches us to divide our time and stay busy with things we should be, and keep it general. But if it's in print, anybody can read it word for word. I mean, because these monitors are online. Anybody can find them.
Yeah.
The stuff that is secret, that we can't talk about, we know because it's in our heads, not on paper.
Yeah.
It's not written down anywhere. Although I like to think there's like a big vault at Grand Lodge with the one written copy. There has to be, right?
Well, that's
I
what
don't
some
think
states
so.
do.
I've heard that on other podcasts, and I'm like, does our Grand Lodge do that? I mean, because
I don't think so.
what if nobody on the Committee on Work agrees on what the word should be? You know what I mean? How does that get decided? I don't know. I'm going to have to do more research.
That's when you get guys on the Committee on Work yelling at each other. I'm not Clandy, you're Clandy.
Exactly. So that would be
I think
neat.
it would ruin it for me if there was just a master copy somewhere where it's written down. That would kill it for me, guys. I mean, that would be the end.
Maybe.
Let me tell you about something called Duncan's. No.
Well, if it was written on the old parchment paper or something with feather pen right next to it, maybe that would be cool. But I'm with you, Grant.
That would soften the blow for me, at least.
It would. It'd be like, oh man,
Yeah.
I did all that work for what? It was written down. I could have sat there and read it.
I think it's like Pennsylvania, and of course I know I'm probably got the whole wrong state, but it's like Pennsylvania or Virginia, and one of their Grand Lodges has a master copy of the ritual, but they're not allowed to see it because it's only accessible by certain members of Grand Lodge, and they've got the DIs, the district instructors and stuff like that occasionally get together and review it like that. And then from there on out, the rest of the year, you're on your own. You have to rely on your district instructors because they're a strict ear-to-mouth state, And
yeah.
so it's kind of weird because it's hey, we have this master copy of the ritual, totally printed, but mouth to ear in every other instance, which I don't object to that. I think it's a cool way to do it. But it does create instances like you described where you have different instructors that will disagree with each other on stuff. And so you have lodges that do rituals slightly differently because it depends on who their district instructor is. All right, so into the meat of the podcast, so to speak. Want to start off with the disclaimer that when we are told how and that we should act as Masons, that occurs at the end of the first section of the first degree, the entered apprentice degree. It is not monitorial. So we talked about this a little bit in the questions. What can we and can't we talk about? This is one of those things that we can't really go into detail about. It's just one of those things, So yeah. It's non-monitorial, as we call it.
Well, you're told how to act when you're still a perfect Mason.
Yeah.
Right when you're made one. So you just think back to that part, and that's kind of where we're gauging this, starting this from. How to act as a Mason.
And to
Gotta get
any
the most out of
non-Masons in
it.
the audience who are at a loss to what we're talking about, sorry. But,
Go to your local lodge.
yes,
Burn
go to your
yourself a
local
petition.
But I will say that there is a specific demand that is made of the candidate that teaches the lesson of charity. And so that's as specific as I'm going to get about the actual ritual portion of that. But let's just say that charity is a big part of how you're supposed to act as a Mason. Now, it's not all of how you're supposed to act as a Mason, but it's a big part of it.
So I like that you bring that up. That's a good one to talk about because charity, because we are an ancient and honorable fraternity. And charity a long time ago used to mean something different than it means today. Not that I'm knocking charity, because I think it is like a cornerstone of what we do. Our teachings should lead us to want to do charitable actions. If you're following our supports, brotherly love, and strength, you're going to want to do charity as we know it today.
Absolutely.
Help out the needy.
And Masons, by and large, on a monetary scale, we donate $1 million a day to charity. So I think we do a great job on a monetary basis of donating to charities, whether it's the Scottish Rite Hospital, which is arguably the most famous charity that we have. But there are other charities that we have out there. I know
Shriners Hospitals.
Shriners Hospital.
Oh, Shriners, Scottish Rite. So go grab your monitor, look in the back, look up what charity means, and in the Texas Monitor, charity means universal love or goodwill, forgiving.
Forgiving. That's an interesting one.
I didn't catch the part about helping out the needy. So when we talk about charity, we have to include that part of the meaning in it. Not only do we have to continue doing our charitable works that gets us into our communities and shows people that, we're here to help. We're here to support our community, make the world a better place. You do that by helping out the needy, or at least a portion of it. But charity's more than that for the Mason. Mm-hmm. So charity could be something as simple as keeping that positive attitude with somebody that is not with you.
In terms of like disagreement or...
Yeah, or just, you wake up in a bad mood and you fight it and you stay in a good mood, and you dispense that onto the world, There's your universal love or goodwill going out. Somebody's being rude to you and you're not rude to them. You're forgiving. Again, there's charity. It doesn't always have to be, I'm going to donate to the Red Cross, or I'm going to go pick up trash, or I'm going to go do the soup kitchen. Those are very, very important things, but we've lost sight of what the whole scope of what charity should be for us as Masons.
Right. There. Now that you mention forgiveness, there was really interesting. This was back in November, I think. I was in Houston. I went to a friend's church, and they had a speaker there, R.T. Kendall, and he was basing his reading material off of Genesis 45, and he had a lot of points. The main topic of discussion was the idea of true, total, unconditional loving forgiveness, and how difficult that is to actually practice. It's one of those things that I struggle with all the time, even though, theoretically I know how it works, but, true, total, unconditional forgiveness is a really tough demand to make of people.
Yeah.
And I have a couple notes on my phone from it, but, it's, we talk about making the world a better place, but part of Masonry, obviously, is that self-improvement, and that ties in a lot with forgiveness, because there's a quote that he said, forgive them. Until you forgive them, you will be bound in chains. You should forgive them. In fact, you must. So how are we going to better ourselves unless we learn to let go of the trespasses that others, have done to us? And, how are we going to better ourselves if we are bound by others' chains? That kind of thing.
Yeah. One of the greatest lessons I was ever taught in my entire life is that forgiveness of others is the gift you give to yourself. And I think that goes right along with what we're taught there in that first degree. If we're talking that charity is forgiving, not only is it forgiving the guy that cuts you off in traffic, but it's forgiving bigger offenses as well, and realizing that until you let that go, it's very hard to do something else. It's hard to bring your focus to a point where you should be working on helping others, the outward charities, the helping of the needy. Very hard to do if you're to notions of not necessarily hatred, but if you're not forgiving someone, you're holding something in. You're holding in anger or resentment, and those things distract you from the real world purpose of what you're here to do.
Yeah.
There was another quote that he said that R.T. Kendall had about this, and actually kind of ties into what you just said, Grant. The worst thing in the world to happen to you can also be the best thing to happen to you, provided that you totally forgive the one that hurt you. So that kind of ties in a little bit, but, the rest of it is mostly, by and large, a very Christian perspective on forgiveness, which I don't know is entirely appropriate for a Masonic podcast, but it's the exploring that idea is very fun. It's very enriching, and it's very important.
No, I mean, forgiveness is the gateway to wisdom, because how can you get anything out of a situation if you're plotting and scheming how you're gonna, get revenge on that grudge you have on somebody, or it's just eating at you? You got to let it go and learn from it.
Yeah, can you imagine how much time you'd be wasting just by plotting and scheming all of that? Good Lord.
How counterproductive is that to friendship and brotherly love, which is what we're here to do. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that being part of the definition of charity.
You can't build a strong foundation on hate,
No, and it's going to happen in Masonry, because that's one thing I've learned is it'll kick you out of your comfort zone and put you in a position that makes you feel uncomfortable, whether it be standing in front of lodge doing your questions and answers, or somebody being picked before you for an office, or whatever it may be. It's going to crimp your style every once in a while to make you a better man. If you learn to forgive those trespasses, or whatever the case may be.
Or perceived trespasses, too. Because a lot of times it's just in your head, man.
No doubt.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And it's one of those things that people tend not to separate those two. The true trespasses versus the perceived trespasses. It can get pretty ugly because of that sometimes.
It can feel just as real. If it's in your head, it can stay in your head. So again, if charity is giving forgiveness, and that's kind of how I look at that. You're giving forgiveness. It's a gift that you're giving to others, and you're giving to yourself. If we're going to do that as part of the Masonic definition of charity, give it liberally.
Yeah.
No doubt.
When it comes to personal financial charity, what are your guys' strategies? I mean, obviously, not to, I want to clarify to anybody listening that, we're not trying to toot our own horns here, but, what are y'all's personal strategies? Like, let's say that we have brothers that are looking for ways to make a difference, and maybe not just financially, but, whether it's through volunteering or financial means or whatever. Let's say we have some brothers that don't feel like they're doing that. and want to get started, like what are y'all's takes on that? Like how do you get started for somebody that's not involved in any form, voluntary or financial, of charity? What's your go-to?
My theory on the financial end is that I don't want to donate financially to the large group. In other words, if I'm going to give, say, at my church, I certainly don't mind giving to the church, but I want to give to a specific project that has personal meaning to me, whether that is to a mission trip, to a youth event, to to assist a particular person. I would rather direct my funds because I have more emotional attachment and value. I see the value in what I'm giving if it's directed towards a specific purpose. When you see these churches that go through these large scale dramas where money has been siphoned off by a particular person within the church who did not have the best intentions. A good way to prevent that is to say, okay, I'm going to donate this towards operating expenses. I'm going to donate this towards the mission trip. Making your donations a direct donation to where you want it to be not only gives you power towards it, but it encourages you to donate more because you see a cause that you care about and you direct your funds towards that cause. To me, that's that assists me in not only wanting to donate more, but I know where the money's going. Time-wise, I do think time is the greatest donation you can make to a charitable organization. You really cannot equate that in dollars and cents. So if you have time to give, and if you're using that 24-inch gauge, you'll have the time to give. Giving your time to a cause that you care about, you're going to be more passionate to do better work, and it's really going to pay dividends as a person and your personal growth.
Yeah, and kind of like to tie into that, something that you mentioned, that something that provides value to you. Something that, everybody should know is that just because it's charity doesn't mean it shouldn't provide value to you,
Sure.
Find something that rewards you.
And if you see the reward in the difference it makes in your community, that's still a reward to you. It's not selfish to want to feel the return of what you're doing. I don't see it as a selfish act to say, hey, guys, I don't want my funds going into paying for someone else to drive a newer Escalade. I want my funds to go into an orphan fund. You see a lot. I mean, the clearest example was the Susan G. Komen dust up a few years ago
100%.
When it came out that the majority of their expenses came to marketing for more donations, and very little was actually going to cancer patients or cancer research. That charity has had to revive their entire game plan effectively on how they were spending that money. And if 80 cents on the dollar that you donate is going to salaries, well, maybe you find a different organization, or maybe you have cash in your pocket and give it directly to those who need it. There sure isn't any overhead in handing somebody what they need.
Yeah, when there's a guy out, hey, when I'm in downtown Fort Worth and there's somebody who says, hey man, I need $5 for lunch, or, whatever, I said, sure, I know there's no overhead. And he may not be using it for lunch. He may be using it for something else entirely. But you know what? I know that he's going to put it to 100% of his use, or her, but...
Sure.
For those of y'all that are looking into charities and charity organizations to donate to, I highly recommend using, it's called, y'all will have to look this up, it's called something like Charity Navigator, and it rates the different charities. It tells you about how much they spend on different stuff, all that kind of thing. So, Charity Navigator, very useful.
I did not know that was out there, Brother Gabe. And to your point about the guys who are asking for money for food, I am guilty of saying, okay, come on, and walking them in and buying the meal, rather than simply handing that money, because I don't have to wonder 24 hours later if that went to the liquor store.
Yeah.
If that went to something not productive, I would much rather walk in and say, what do you want to eat? And buy the meal. Which some restaurants downtown
don't like that.
Absolutely.
Touching on the, handing out money to, homeless guys or gals or whatever, like you say, you kind of, there is that, I am guilty of taking them to a restaurant. This is the way you phrased it, which I found was really interesting. Because it is kind of this self-centered sort of thing. Not in a bad way, but you kind of want to make sure, hey, my money is being used for good purposes, right? It's that feel-good sensation that you want to know that your money is being productive, that it is being wholesome. And for a long, long time, I didn't give any sort of assistance, other than, buying sandwiches for folks, taking people out to restaurants and stuff. I've had some very interesting lunchtime conversations with some very impromptu guests. But for that same reason of like, well, what if he's just going to go buy like a bunch of 40s or, buy something else like drugs or whatever. And I had a conversation with a past master of Julian Field Lodge, and he was, very clear with it. He says, no. Don't ever make that distinction. Don't make that restriction. Because you know what? Maybe it is going towards something totally destructive. Maybe he's buying more alcohol or drugs or whatever. But it is some level of relief that he's experiencing because of that. And it may not be positive.
Yeah.
But when you are totally destitute and you're living on the streets, any moment of escape is a total blessing, whether it's a negative escape or a positive escape. So I thought that was a really interesting take on it. And while that's not my 100% personal take on it now I instead of going and buying people sandwiches, my wallet is filled with $5s, somebody asked me, hey man, can you give $1? Here's $5, and it really changed on it. Like if somebody wants to go buy 40s, of malt liquor, then that's on, hey, buy it on me. I had a guy go up to me outside of the Masonic Temple. This was a couple months ago, and he said, hey man, I'm not going to lie to you. I just want to buy some malt liquor, do you have any cash that I could get? And I said, well, how much does a bottle cost? And he says, it's like, $3. And so I handed him $7 and I said, go buy 2. And it's not positive. It's not productive, but that's his little escape. And maybe I'm wrong about how that works, but if we're looking at the grand scheme of things, the corporal body and the things we do to it don't matter that much.
No, and it has a lot to do with intent as well. So, that's just a personal decision everyone has to make, because I'm the opposite. I don't give money out to people on the streets. I do donate quite a bit, but it's, to things I enjoy. But I choose not to do that.
Yeah. And that's also a totally valid way to do things, and that way, where your money's going, which is nice.
That's an interesting take, Gabe. Through that lens, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. Good stuff.
There's I was looking at the section of Lightfoot's monitor that is tied to this portion of the ritual. And it talks about the cornerstone, and specifically, he had an interesting quote that I picked up on, and I don't know that we can say this is strictly related to how Masons should act, but I saw it and I picked up on it and I wanted to read it to you guys anyway. That his specific wording was, in the notes of Menu, the sacred book of the Brahmins, it is said, if anyone has an incurable disease, let him advance in a straight path toward the invincible northeast point, feeding on water and air till his mortal frame totally decays, and his soul becomes united with the Supreme. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I guess it kind of goes in with what I was thinking about, the corporal body is not that relevant in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, no, it's the truth. From whence he came. But, no, that's interesting that he's got him walking in a northeast direction.
Yeah, and so that's the Hindu Brahmins.
Yeah, I mean, that's connected to so many cultures, That's really intriguing. No doubt. No, I think something that I like, when I've asked this question myself many times, what do we do as speculative Masons? What do we do? And lo and behold, it's in the monitor laid out plain and simple. And that's the one that I think we can kind of expound on pretty good. So it says in the monitor, by speculative Masonry, we learn to subdue the passions, act upon the square, keep a tongue of good report, maintain secrecy, and practice charity. So how many things is that? There's learn to subdue the passions, that's 1. Act upon the squares, 2. Keep a tongue of good rapport is 3. Maintain secrecy is, what are we up to, 4?
5.
And then,
oh, no. I'm bad at math.
Did we lose count? And then practice charity.
That's 5.
So, yeah. So, out of all of those, there's only one that's not internal. Practicing charity is something that you're going to do with other people. That you're going to interact with other people. That's how you practice charity. You can't practice charity on yourself. In a sense, it's got to be outward. But other than that, we learn to subdue our passions. We do that ourselves. It's all internal. We act upon the square. That's us dealing with our passions and our desires and making sure our actions are squared, by the square morality. Keep a tongue of good report. That's almost acting on the square, because if you act on the square, you're going to keep a tongue of good report.
Yeah, you could argue that it's just a byproduct of that.
You got it. But again, it's something that you're going to do internally. And maintain secrecy. I mean, that's all about internal, thought and, maintaining that secrecy that, whether it be our degree work or whether it be that understanding that you have of Masonry, whatever it may be, you maintain that secrecy on your own. And then the last one, practice charity. You've got to do that out in the world.
The order is interesting. And I think it yields us to look at, so what do we do as Masons? We are very internal. And it's laid out right there. Most of what we do, internal battle, especially when you talk about subduing your, and that is a very difficult lesson to learn. It's a lesson that's something you have to work on every day in every moment, and it's hard to express to people are not Masons. That portion of Masonry is, a lot of it is keep yourself in due bounds. It's a very difficult thing, and it's something that we get support from one another to do, and that support is part of being a Mason is being willing to support one another when the struggles come. That's a large part of our fraternity is the support that we give one another.
No, because this is something that was brought to my attention a long time ago when I went to a presentation by Cliff Porter and Round Rock. And, he brought this up, and when he was talking about it, it was like, it dawned on me. It's like, 90% of what we do is internal. It's making ourselves better, because if everybody did that, this world would be a great place. Wouldn't have half the horrific stuff that goes on in the world, and ultimately that's all you can be responsible for is yourself and your actions. You can't be responsible for somebody else's. And I think it spells it out clearly in here, that Masonry is ultimately an internal journey. One that only you can say what's right or wrong, because those tenets are, in your chest. You got to follow your heart.
And Grant, tying back to something that you said just a couple of seconds ago, I heard a great quote by somebody, and I cannot remember for the life of me who said this, but a wonderful quote that I saw about Masonry was, Masonry is not a fraternity of men that are united by being better than everybody else. It is a fraternity of men that is united by their common flaws. This is...
Yeah.
I thought it was a great summary. It's because we're here to work on ourselves, take that internal journey, as you talk about it, Rhit, and help others on their internal journey and make perfect cornerstones out of everybody.
And you read any book, any self-help book, and it's common knowledge now that you are who you hang out with and who you associate with. And so if you're truly on a path to get better as a person, you're going to look for those people to do it with. You
need people that check you.
You got it. And that you can get better off of, that inspire you, or, teach you what to do, how to act, either by example or whispering good counsel, or maybe you learn how not to act in an environment that's safe to do that. Masonry provides that with what should be a cornucopia of men that are trying to make themselves better. It's the best way I heard it described was selfless selfishness. It's hard to say.
I think that. One of the, and here's, tying into that, here's some more Lightfoot for you. But from that same section, there's a couple bullet points related to being checked and having others check you and all this. The cornerstone is a bullet point 1. The cornerstone is the most important stone of the building, right? The cornerstone is perfectly square and strong. Cubes are an emblem of truth, right? So we got our first 3 bullet points. And because of all of that, the cornerstone of the building is the one that's checked the most often and the most thoroughly with the plumb, square, and level. Because we absolutely have to be sure that it is, if we say that it is the most important, the most load-bearing corner, block of the building, then we have to be the ones checking it all the time. And so if every man in the fraternity is, his own cornerstone, then we need to be out there internally and with each other with the plumb, square, and level, and, of course, other tools.
Yeah. No, working that plumb, square, and level on yourself internally is something that, like Grant said, it's a daily practice. And for me, again, if you're doing all these things that are internally, those first 4, practice and charity is a byproduct, because we talked about the definition of charity a minute ago. As a Mason, practicing charity is essentially acting on the square, maintaining a tongue of good rapport, and subduing your passions. If you're doing all that, your mind is going to lead you in a direction to practice charity. You're not going to be a guy that's going to be disgruntled or, a guy that's not giving or forgiving. You're going to see the wisdom in all that. And if you don't, you need to refer back to the first four.
So, we're talking about now, like, what it means to act and walk like a Mason, right? But, how do we make sure that we stay acting and walking like Masons? How do we check ourselves? I mean, here we are talking about checking ourselves against the square and the plumb and the level and the compasses and all these working tools. How do we do that, practically speaking? Like in our everyday lives, like how are we going to do that?
I think one of the things that's built in, a good portion of it that's already built in, is the lodge itself. You have to attend lodge. You have to recharge those batteries and be a part of what's going on up there. You don't necessarily have to work in the degree, although I highly recommend it, because that's part of the journey of what we're on, is bringing new brothers to light and being a part of that ceremony. But even if you're on the sideline, to listen to that degree again or listen to that lecture again, because you should stay for the lecture every time, because you're going to get something new out of it if you're open to it, and be a part of it. Be a part of the programs that they've got going on and be around those brothers. They'll inspire you to be better. That's not the only way or all that you have to do, because
in fact, there's a lot more. I would argue that there's more, even more.
Absolutely. If you were to break it down into percentages, maybe attending lodge and being a part's 40%. Because you have to do this stuff at your leisure time and at will. I mean, you have to be ready to practice these tenets at any moment.
I think one of the best ways to
go for it, Grant. Sorry.
So if you want to talk about squaring yourself, squaring your actions, you have to have a measure of a square is a measuring tool. So how are you going to measure your actions? If you have something that you are internally struggling with, to know whether you are acting upon the square, that's why you have brethren. That's why they're there. Pick up the phone. Talk it out. Have one of your brothers put you in place. I can't tell you how many times someone at the lodge I've discussed, hey, this is kind of what's going on, and put me in my place. When you make that call, be ready to.
No, I think we lost you.
Oh,
you did. You did cut out.
I'm sorry about that.
You were saying be ready to, and we lost you.
Okay. Be ready to hear something that you don't want to hear, because that's how you get better. And so having a group of brothers that you can trust and you can confide in and talk about the things that you're struggling with. If you're having to ask yourself if what you're doing is right, you probably already know the answer. But if you need to talk it out and you need someone to give you a new perspective, that's one of the best things that you have. Your best resource is one of your brothers there in the lodge. Whether you got to go down to the lodge to get it or pick up the phone and say, hey, Gabe, this is what's going on and this is where I'm at with it. Be ready for that call and be ready to make the call when you need to. It's not anything to be shy about.
Yeah, I mean, you could, if nothing else, just talk to them and get some motivation in a situation that you need. They may very well have been through something similar. You've got to draw off of them and their experiences.
Yeah, and then what you're mentioning. How do you feel about this? If you have a doubt about it, right? You kind of already know the answer, right? Like you were saying, Grant. That your intuition is God given, right? The Grand Architect. He gave you he or it or whatever, right? Gave you that intuition for a reason, and that's one of the reasons why. Pretty much one of the first things we mentioned in Lodge is, the volume of sacred law, right?
Yeah.
Where does all your intuition come from? If you don't think your square is calibrated, you don't think your level is calibrated, go back to your volume of sacred law. Where's your intuition coming from, right? So,
yeah.
One of the things I'd like to add is, read your volume of sacred law. If it's the Bible, the Tanakh, the Quran, whatever, right? The book of the law, if you're into Thelema, I don't know, read your book of sacred law, read other people's volumes of sacred law. Right now I'm going through the Quran, and it's a great read. It's amazing, so, make sure, obviously, and I'm not advocating syncretism. I think that's how you say it. I'm not advocating syncretism, but make sure that you get perspective from other books of sacred law as well.
Nothing wrong with that.
Make sure you keep a copy with you and refer to that often. And Rhit, what you were saying about doing the degrees and stuff like that, it just helps. It's part of that, I guess, what we call contemplative masonry. Where you start well, when I was in this degree, well, what did that mean,
Exactly.
You sit down and you think about it, and you could just, in your head, you could just picture compasses, like a literal, you could picture a physical set of compasses and just use that as a contemplative / meditative item, and think about that. Think about your degrees.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've found myself in the middle of a lecture have some thought that stopped me dead in my tracks. It's like, holy cow, that's what that means. And I've given the lecture, not only listened to it a bunch of times, and a moment happened right in the middle of it. So you just got to immerse yourself in it, and be a part of it.
I don't know if you caught it, but a couple weeks ago when I was giving the EA lecture, I paused for a second. I thought about it. I paused for a second because something hit me, and I was like, oh. I had one of those aha moments that you're talking about, in the middle of a degree. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was learning the lectures, especially the Fellowcraft lecture, I mean, it's beautiful and very inspiring, and it had one about the contemplative. It leads them to the most exalted ideas of the perfection of his divine creator. And it really got me to thinking the importance of that introspective contemplation and where those ideas will come just out of thin air for whatever it may be, some program at lodge, some presentation at work, when you actually quieten your mind and contemplate and converse with the Almighty, if you will, those ideas come out of nowhere. And as a Mason, we just emphasize that. We emphasize the power of prayer, which Masons should do for, not just a great and laudable undertaking any minute they can think about, you know what I mean? Pay homage.
You should be one of the ways that I like to subscribe to that idea that was expressed to me by somebody in a friend's church. I tend to go to whenever I travel to Houston, I go to church there, and it's a very different denomination than mine, and I always get a lot of insights just from that outside perspective. And one of their pastors said, you should be drowning in prayer. And I love that idea. You should drown in your own prayer and other people's prayers, not just your own prayers, but when other people pray for you, pray for other people. Have other people pray for you and pray for yourself and pray to God and pray for the world around you. But you should be just, up past your nose in prayer.
No. And I can remember as a little kid, as I was coming into the idea of prayer, I had the thought, well, you want to save it until you really need it kind of thing. And
you've got a budget.
Yeah. It's the one thing that is, you just can't overuse it. There is no budget. Every prayer, is just as powerful as the next, and when you really need it, you get the group involved.
The only thing I would point out is the Facebook prayer. The Facebook prayer really gets to me. If those people are saying the prayer, that's great. But boy, if you're just typing it into Facebook, I don't think God has a Facebook account.
Oh yeah, repost this if you want the blessings of God.
One like equals one prayer.
Yeah.
That's when I delete you from my friends feed.
Praying on the go from your iPhone.
Yeah, retweet, please.
No, post an inspirational post. Don't waste your time with that stuff.
Absolutely.
If you need prayers, put that on Facebook, and I see it all the time. Either I need unspoken prayers, or when my brother was sick, we put it on there, and man, we had prayers coming from all over the world, and it helped. I know it did. So, and as Masons, we teach the power of prayer. We teach the power of introspective contemplation. You've got to quieten your mind. And that's not going to happen at Lodge. You've got to think about this stuff. My mentor, Sam Levacy, 100 years old this year, works on this work every day. And I know he's a memory guy, but when he's working on that work, there's times that he stops and goes, what does that mean? Or has those aha moments, to where Masonry means more to him now because he took the time to tumble it around in his head. So you're absolutely right, Gabe. It doesn't all happen at Lodge. It's vital, but it's not all there.
Yeah, that's true. One of the things that's another one of my bullet points. Let me pull it up again. So the question that I had here is, what does it mean to walk and act as a Mason as opposed to the average profane person?
So for me, it's that guy that's got the positive attitude. It's that guy that is always willing to lend a hand when he's able to. Doesn't leave a person in a bind. And I'm not going to just say a brother doesn't leave anybody. It's something as simple as that. A smile's carried me a long way. It's opened a lot of doors, and it's a simple act. Be genuine when you introduce yourself and meet new people. Be interested in them, and actually show that you really care about them. That goes back to charity, universal love. Have that universal love, and spread that goodwill.
I love what you say about how, a smile has carried you quite far before, because it's a lot of these actions that can really make a difference. Hey, you might have made somebody's day and it didn't cost you anything and you didn't have to try hard, but if you're just nice, it's one of those things that it's so simple, but it's simultaneously just such a hard concept sometimes for people to grasp. Just be nice, You
never know what your small things mean to somebody else. When you define something as big or small, that's your definition. You don't know where other people are in life, and being genuine, like Rhit said, being genuine, to me is part of being square, is being genuine to other people, because at the end of the day, the people that are on this earth are the people that we are going to be around until. So there's no reason to hold a false face or to look to have ill intent for anybody. It just doesn't happen, and Masonry helps us teach those lessons. So to me, one of the biggest parts of walking as a Mason is walking true. Be true to the words that you say, be true to what you do, and make sure that you understand what you do on a day-to-day basis. Even something you see as small could have a big effect on somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been told before, you're always in a good mood. You're always happy. And I attribute that to some of the things that, Masonry's taught me to keep myself on a path that keeps me motivated, that keeps me happy and feels like I'm a part of something, in making the world a better place. And if you're if you're involved in that and immersed in that concept, it's hard to be in a bad mood. I mean, it's going to happen from time to time, but when you get around other people, it just seems to draw back out of you, and you become part of a working part of society again, and you feel like you're accomplishing something, as small, as big as it may be.
Positivity, you know.
Yeah. So, you know, and in the end, they may come to find out that you are a Mason and associate that with Masonry. They may not. You know, depends on if you wear the lapel pins or, you know, have the bumper stickers or whatever, or if it comes up in conversation. But irregardless, you know, somebody's going to catch on to that at some point, and it's going to tie back to this fraternity.
And that brings us to a good point that, you know, as a Mason, you have to remember that your actions represent every other Mason in the world. So you have to hold yourself to a higher standard. If you're out there and you're going to wear that lapel pin or you're going to have that bumper sticker, man, don't be the guy with the bumper sticker, you know, with the square and compass on your bumper, flipping everybody the bird, cutting in and out of traffic, you know, cursing people out. Don't be that guy, because you have effectively, you know, to someone who doesn't know any better, that's what every Mason is what you're doing. Everything that you do represents all of us.
No, Omar just posted, you're someone's first impression of Masonry, and that's so true, because say you've got a coworker you've been working with for 2 years, and then they find out you're a Mason. They're going to look back on everything you've done, you know, and get that overview of your character, and they're going to either say, wow, you know, and associate that together, or they're going to go, oh, that's what a Mason's like, you know. So you have to keep that in mind. You know, you want to be setting that example, whether someone knows you are or not, because there could come a day when they're going to find out you are, and you want that to be associated with good people.
And so far, you know, I've been very lucky in that when people see the lapel pin, or I've got a skull cap, you know, like not with a skull on it, but like a knit cap.
Yeah,
it has a square and compass on it. I've got a lapel pin. I've got, like, you know, a gazillion of those. The ring, whatever. People's reactions have been overwhelmingly positive because they've already had somebody in their family or that they knew that was a Mason that they walked away from with a great impression. So I'm always very glad that I'm not necessarily somebody's first impression of what Masonry is, because, you know, it's not that I'm, you know, like I feel like I'm a very agreeable person, but being a younger guy, I can tend to act not reckless, but, you know, I'm very exuberant and loud and annoying and all that, and I'm sure that certain of our past masters can agree, which is not to knock them, but, you know, I'm always glad that I'm people's second or third impression of Masonry, and that the sentence I hear most often is, "Oh, my grandpa was a Mason," and so. But the common sentence that has actually been told to me upon people finding out that I was a Mason was actually, "Thank you." It was really interesting. I liked it.
Yeah. No, it's been well received. You know, especially in our neck of the woods. You know, Masonry's been kind of a Texas tradition for a long time. So most people's grandfathers, you know, or uncle, great uncle, something, you know, were Masons. So they usually have an impression of it, but if not, you know, or irregardless, you still want to act in that manner. You know, I think somebody who is, you know, contemplating that question, how should I act as a Mason? One of the best things you can do for yourself is read those charges again. Those are some of the most directive things we have to use on how to behave.
I mean, you know, that's the instruction manuals right there. We were going over it at the Masters Night, and man, what a wealth of information that there is in those charges.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good information on how to behave, what you should and shouldn't do as a Mason. So definitely go back and read over those. And if you're so inclined, memorize them to help your lodge out.
That's a great thing to be able to do. It was right after somebody delivers the lecture, go deliver the memorized charge. That looks good.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I was trying to look up the part where it talks about, here's a good one. So it talks about just a short part in one of the charges, just to show you how directive they are. Universal benevolence, you are always to inculcate. And you're probably going to have to go look up universal benevolence, the first time you run across it, and dig in deep to what that means, and then what it means to you, and how you're going to practice it. And that's just one line out of one of the charges. You're going to have to spend a little bit of time with that and the Google search button right by you.
Yeah, you could spend a lifetime dissecting those.
Exactly. So it shouldn't really be a secret to any Mason on how we should act. I mean, because of course it's all throughout our ritual, which you have to go to see and hear, but it's all throughout our monitor. Start with those charges. But it's a wealth of information on how a Mason should walk and act.
Right on. All right, so do we want to talk about events?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, this was a great discussion, by the way. That's one of the reasons why I love what we've started to do here.
No, and I'm just sitting here flipping through the monitor, and I'm like, oh man, I could go on for hours on how we behave. I mean, I'm looking at the 4 cardinal virtues, which is part of the long form lecture in the EA, but most of the time you don't get it.
That's why I'm learning it. I feel like even if we didn't do the long form lecture, I want to learn it so that at least we include that. It makes no sense to mention them and then just not talk about it.
No, I mean, because there's right there, temperance is teach you to avoid excess, any vicious or, licentious habits. It's such good stuff. So we could go on for all night, but yeah, we probably should move on to events before we end up going to midnight.
Yeah.
Sure, guys. You might not want to hear me fall down on the floor. It's been...
Yeah, we just kind of hear snoring from your general direction.
Absolutely. According to my wife, I snore. I don't necessarily believe her. I don't think that happens, but...
Well then, ladies and gentlemen, moving past what we've talked about tonight, let's look towards the future. So, March 11th, Young County Masonic Lodge 485 is putting on their 10th annual public auction at 9 a.m. The location is the Old Ag Barn in Fireman's Park on Highway 67 in Graham, Texas. March 14th.
That sounds like a good time.
Yeah, it'll be fun. March 14th, Panther City Lodge number 1183 is putting on an Entered Apprentice degree. If you are an Entered Apprentice or above, please come by the temple and welcome a new brother to the craft. That's where I'm going to be on that Tuesday. So if you're in the area, come to the Masonic Temple, 1100 Henderson. Join us. I'll be visiting Panther City for an EA degree. March 14th, same day, Crowley Lodge 1437 is putting on a Fellcraft degree. Also March 14th, Smithfield Lodge 455 is putting on a Fellcraft degree. So if you're a Fellcraft or above, pick one of those two, Crowley Lodge or Smithfield Lodge, whichever one is closest to you, and go and, watch somebody take the second step in Masonry.
Both of them are great lodges.
And that's such a cool degree to witness. Yeah, so if you're a Fellowcraft, go. You're not going to see a lot of Fellowcraft degrees. It's just one of those. It's just one of those weird things where we don't. It feels like we do less of them, but I don't know.
I know what you mean. They go by so quick.
But yeah, so if you're a Fellowcraft, Crowley Lodge, Smithfield Lodge, March 14th, Fellowcraft degrees. Go. If you're a master and you want to go see Fellowcraft degree, go. Pick one that's closest to you. March 17th is the 64th District Grand Masters Visit/Banquet. Tickets are $15, and the event starts at 6:30 p.m. That is at the Masonic Temple in downtown Fort Worth. Again, 1100 Henderson Street. March 17th is... Nope, that's the same item. March 25th is a Commandery Workday at Phoenix Lodge in Weatherford. All 3 orders are going to be conferred starting at 8 a.m. after the 7 a.m. breakfast. Thanks to Arlington Commandery 84, Southside Commandery 83, and Weatherford Commandery 521 for putting on the orders. If you are a Sir Knight, come on by to Phoenix Lodge in Weatherford and support your brothers. That's March 25th. Also on March 25th, Haltom City Lodge is having their annual Veterans Fish Fry at 2 p.m. They're going to have live music. April 8th, Lufkin Lodge 669 is putting on a scholarship golf tournament. The tournament is taking place at, and I'm going to mess this up, Netches Pines Diboli. Dibali? I don't know. Netches Pines. Let's look that up. Registration is at 8 a.m. and the start is at 9 a.m. The cost for a 4-person team is $300. The cost for a corporate team is $500. There are multiple contests that are going to be held, and there are going to be several levels of sponsorship available if you're interested in that. For more details, please check out Lufkin Lodge 669 on Facebook. I believe they go by Lufkin Lodge 669 AF and AM on Facebook, but you should be able to find it if you put it in the search bar. April 8th, Webb Lodge 1454 is putting on an outdoor degree. Reach out to them at www.weblodge.org, and that's Webb with 2 B's.
Yeah, we got to go to that.
Oh, it'll be so fun. And as always, Fort Worth 148 meets on the second Monday of each month, starting dinner at 6 p.m., meeting at 7 p.m. We meet at 1100 Henderson Street in Fort Worth, Texas, on the 3rd floor, and dinner is on 3M. We've got the travel gavel. Come, take it away from us, please, because we want to take it back.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then I guess to close out, we can close out with a quote, right?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So this is from Teddy, one of our favorites. There are good men and bad men of all nationalities, creeds, and colors. And if this world of ours is ever to become what we hope someday it may become, it must be by the general recognition that the man's heart and soul, the man's worth and actions, determine his standing. That's something that President and brother Teddy Roosevelt wrote in 1903.
Yeah, he was ahead of his time. Cool dude.
Yeah.
All right.
So if you want to reach out to us, please find us at fortworth148.org. On Facebook, we are at Fort Worth Lodge 148, and our email is info148@fortworth148.org. And I guess I'll toss this out there too. If you want to reach me, Gabriel, on a personal level, just hit me up at texanmason.com or texanmason@gmail.com.
Cool.
All right.
I think that was another good one that we probably could have talked another 2 hours about it.
Gentlemen, appreciate you. Always good to talk to you.
Brothers, y'all have a great evening.
Do the same. We'll see you guys soon.
Likewise.